Last time we observed that in order to have a ministry that has a balance of the fivefold giftings, our values as well as our culture, or how we do ministry, will likely also have to change. In this episode, we'll look at how important the wineskin is in order to fulfill the mission of the church. This is the how of implementing the fivefold ministry. With the reality of our existing structures, what would need to change in order to see the fivefold ministry functioning in our church?
Welcome to another one of our Leadership Matters series. This time we are taking a unique look at the fivefold gifts from Ephesians 4 and how they apply within each of our ministries. Just click the link in the description box to download our free resources or the complete workbook. You can access any of our other podcasts by going to icmcanada.org/leadershipmatters.
I'm making the point that each of the equipping gifts of Ephesians 4 does not necessarily reflect their position or even a definitive leadership role. I'm not advocating the solution is to now go around calling people apostle or prophet or, for that matter, pastor. These fivefold gifts have a specific function. They have been given to the body of Christ so that each member will be equipped to do the work of the ministry. Ministry is not something for just leaders while the rest of us watch. As a believer, we are all ministers. For those who are actually looking through the notes with us, we're now on pages 47 to 50. Often those serving the body with one or more of these functions, provide them a sphere of influence or of leadership in the body. Again, it is important to be reminded that what we mean by leadership in the body is more about serving others than being served. Jesus is our model. It is not about position and power. With that foundation, let me make a few comments regarding leadership and the fivefold gifts. For good or bad, history indicates that most, if not all, movements are started by a strong charismatic leader. Someone whose values and assumptions have a huge impact on the culture of the group. And that can last for generations. Yet for the movement to grow beyond the founder stage, these values must be passed on to others in the organization and become part of the life of the community. If this does not happen, the movement and the resultant organization will not survive past this initial stage. While the organization may continue to exist, it will never truly fulfill its mission or purpose. Death of a movement or organization does not mean that it will necessarily close its doors, but rather it will no longer fulfill its reason to exist. Still might see the lights on through the window. As we have seen, the fivefold ministry of Jesus, our founder, should be reflected in the values and cultures in the movement that he initiated. While we know that the universal eternal church, remember, large C, capital C, will not end, there is a danger, though, that for local expressions of this movement, as in the local church, to lose its way. Within less than 100 years after Paul founded and wrote to the church in Ephesus, it was in decline. And if you visit the ancient city today, there's really not much left. What happened? They definitely had a good founder in Paul. Well, there are many factors, of course, but for our purposes here, let's look at the leadership dynamic. Hirsch makes the case from history that a man like John Wesley functioned in several of the fivefold gifts. He was apostolic and founded a movement, prophetic in that he spoke to the social issues of his day and traveled tirelessly on horseback to preach the good news. Though not as strong in the pastoral gift, he did believe in the importance of the church and its mission, designing a system to care for the poor. While teaching was not as prominent, he designed a discipleship system, one of the first modern small group movements, and his teaching remains with us until this day. Of course, this became known as the methodical or Methodist way. Is it possible for churches who suppress the first three equipping functions, apostolic, prophetic, and evangelistic, to continue to grow over the long haul? Or is it inevitable that, like many previous church movements, they will cease to fulfill the ultimate purpose of the church and eventually have to close their doors? See, closing the doors can take some time, depending on how much momentum they built up. It could take from weeks to decades. Typically, the organization or church just drifts and can even become a completely different type of organization. Harvard and Yale come to mind as examples of this missions drift. No one would confuse them today with the ministerial training college for which they were first formed. See, in the case of Wesley, we see a strong leader who started a movement which was based upon strong vision and values. Certain activities and behaviors were then developed, a Methodist culture that reinforced these. Over time, the form or the way they did things began to solidify and become entrenched. Actually, the more successful a group is, the more likely that this will happen. See, inflexible wineskins always make it difficult to contain the new wine. As with all organizations, if the vision is not revisited and corresponding new structures developed, all that is left is the old structures. See, regardless of how vibrant they once were or how grounded they were on good values, if constant renewal does not take place, a movement or a local church no longer fulfills its purpose and may even cease to exist completely. It's important to remember that all denominations and churches once started as a vibrant movement. It would seem that the apostolic function and gifting is essential in initiating new movements. Remember, I'm using the term here as a function, not necessarily as an office or a position. While this apostolic function is obvious in pioneering new mission endeavors, I would suggest that it may also have a role in establishing denominations and churches if these ministries are going to maintain vibrance and be healthy over the long haul. Facilitating the functioning of this gift maintains focus on vision and mission, rather than reverting to the natural life cycles of merely focusing on maintenance and control. As Snyder points out in his classic book, The Problem with Wineskins, the church was born without priesthood, sacrifice, or tabernacle because the church and Christ together were all three. See, the foundational apostolic function should serve the body by keeping the sending function of the church foremost and continually pioneering new areas for the gospel. It also has a role to play in keeping the church true to apostolic teaching. See, those with apostolic giftings are not just visionaries and dreamers. They also should be involved in helping others apply corrective theology and cultivating biblical leadership. What are the challenges or obstacles in implementing the fivefold balanced ministry approach in your church organization?
We have various free resources available. They will help you discover your own fivefold gift mix as well as that of your team. The ministry flowchart and life cycle will help you renew the wineskins of your ministry. There are links to these materials in the description box below. You can view any of Phil's other podcast series by going to icmcanada.org/leadershipmatters. These include Mentoring Intelligence, Finishing the Race, and Multicultural Teams. If you want a more comprehensive leadership training program for you or your team, check out our Christian Leadership Institute. This is a unique competency-based ministerial training, which utilizes an online platform. For any of our other resources, please visit our library at icmcanada.org/resources.
The reality seems to be that most churches or organizations tend to have one or two of the fivefold functions that are dominant. This is often the result of a leader or leaders who have a similar ministry emphasis, based on their giftings. Certain gifts become valued over others. For example, groups that are always starting new works, forging ahead, breaking old wineskins, if they need breaking or not, likely have a strong apostolic focus. A culture develops that prides itself on constant innovation and change. But this can lead to the organization being task-driven, demanding, and usually relationally unhealthy. There are usually bodies laying in the ditch on either side of the road as they have been run over in the name of progress. On the other hand, those with strong prophetic focus speak the truth and emphasize social justice. Unfortunately, sometimes they can be rather tone-deaf in hearing others. There's often passionate worship and prayer and focus on spiritual warfare. Yet if this is the only focus, it can lead to a group that is hypercritical, judgmental, and a culture that lacks grace and mercy. They usually have a sense that they are the only right ones. They're the last bastion of truth. Groups dominated by the evangelistic function focus on going to those who don't know Jesus, and a culture can develop that equates true spirituality with evangelism and telling others about the good news. Now, sharing the gospel is vital to the mission of the church, obviously, but these groups can feel like motivational sessions and can have a reliance on charismatic types of leaders. This usually leads to a certain shallowness, as taking the time to go deep into the Word is seen as kind of a waste of time in light of the great task ahead. This can then lead to a church that is aggressive and a bit opinionated. And churches led by leaders who are strong pastoral shepherds are usually stable and relationally healthy. They are characterized by people loving each other and caring one another. Spirituality is equated with relational health and community. While this is a very comfortable place, it can lead to an ingrown culture that rejects all change and so is no longer willing to take any risks. Ironically, it is this lack of risk that eventually leads to unhealthy relationships that are so valued. Overprotection, overly cautious, and codependent, these churches can cease to fulfill the ultimate purpose of the church. And churches with a strong teaching function are similar to those with only a strong pastoral function in that they tend to be stable places where people are growing and committed to discipleship, which is great. However, this can lead to becoming overly intellectual, dominated by right doctrine at the price of right living. This can also result in controlling others and a focus on petty doctrines. Spirituality becomes more about acquiring biblical facts and knowledge than living those out in everyday life. All this is a nice way of saying that this emphasis is out of balance and can lead to pride. Okay, this all may be a bit of an oversimplification, but hopefully you see my point for the need of balance in our ministries. And what keeps the balance is an appreciation of each of the fivefold functions. Are there any of these imbalances in your ministry? What changes would be helpful? Our assessment questions can help you discover not only your gifts, but how to bring a balance in your ministry. As our church organization plateaus in growth or encounters a crisis, we usually respond according to our strengths. And those are typically grounded in our gifts. As the saying goes, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem starts to look like a nail. It is just natural that we'll use our primary strength or gift to fix the situation. See, in attempting to bring about change in our churches or organizations, we typically see problems or obstacles as originating from our inability to function more effectively in our primary gift. So in a crisis, those with the teaching emphasis will teach even more and deeper. Those with the pastoral gifting will care more deeply for people and attempt to protect them even more. Those with an apostolic emphasis will seek to start new things and bring about more change. And those with a prophetic leaning will see the solution to the crisis as needing more intense prayer, fasting, and perhaps even calling out the sin in the camp. Let me suggest another approach. Instead of looking to our inherent strengths, the solution may actually be found in returning to a more balanced integration of the fivefold functions so the team can identify what gifts or functions are needed to actually address the crisis. Now, I get it. We're all more comfortable with certain kinds of ministries, not because they necessarily meet the need most effectively, but because we're kind of using our own gift and it's within our own comfort zone. We all have certain values based upon our theology, our experiences, and so our ministry programs are designed around these gifts, rather than utilizing all of the equipping functions within a fivefold approach. Again, at the risk of oversimplification, let me explain this approach from history. See, the Western church model that originated in Europe has generally been the bishop, priest, deacon one, or perhaps the more simplified pastoral teacher one, while the Reformed tradition followed a preacher-elder model. As we discussed last episode, structures that become institutionalized tend to become inward rather than outward focused. See, the Eastern church also was not exempt from this. Since the Reformation and the reforms and revivals over the last few hundred years, the focus has seldom been on reforming ministry values or wineskin. The result has been that many once vibrant movements either became rigid or part of the institutionalized church or ceased to exist altogether. What I'm suggesting is that in order to maintain a healthy movement, we consider a return to a balanced expression of the fivefold ministry functions. To do this, I think we would all have to become more intentional in identifying and developing teams that have a balance of these fivefold functions. Rather than just focusing on offices and positions, giving people the title of apostle, prophet, or dare I say even pastor. Instead, we focus on creating a culture based on kingdom principles and initiate ministry programs that allow all the equipping gifts to function in the body. How about you? Has your ministry become reliant on certain patterns of ministry or only focusing on certain gifts to the exclusion of others? How could this be changed? Now, in our final episode together, I will provide you with a few tools to help you evaluate your current ministry programs and steps that may be helpful in bringing about the necessary change. If you study some of our other MCNet materials, you already have been introduced to our ministry flowchart and organizational life cycle. But for this series, I have adapted these to show how they can be specifically applied to the fivefold ministries. It's going to be good, and so I'm looking forward to having you join me.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Matters and subscribing and sharing us. If you would like to have your own copy of this study, Just click on the link in the description box. For any of our other leadership resources, check out our website, icmcanada.org/resources.